The Sopranos, Season 3, Episode 9, The Telltale Muzzadel. This is the first on-screen acting appearance of Stephanie Joanne Angelina Germanotta, otherwise known as Lady Gaga. It's not a huge role. She plays a high school student hanging out by the pool after hours, doing typical rebellious teenager things, smoking, drinking, laughing hysterically at the boys' roughhousing. Although Gaga would later look back on this appearance and criticize her younger self for not summoning a real laugh, the scene really doesn't tell us much about baby Gaga's potential as an actress. She doesn't have any lines, she doesn't even appear in the credits. It does, however, prove a point she's made again and again in interviews, that she wanted to be an actress long before making music became her primary creative outlet. Well, a lot has happened since that episode aired way back in 2001. Now an international pop sensation, Gaga has had the opportunity to rekindle her love of acting in recent years, with 3 major film roles under her belt and undoubtedly more to come. So in this video, I want to take a look at Lady Gaga, the actress. How has her status as a pop icon influenced the way we discuss her work as an actor? How has acting expanded or complicated the ways we think about her as an artist? A few things to note. This video focuses on her dramatic narrative work. I love the Muppets dearly, but this analysis does not include her concert films, television specials, documentaries, or even MTV's Boiling Point.
Who puts that in their mouth? Would you put that in your mouth?
2, this video does include spoilers for A Star is Born, House of Gucci, and Joker Folie deux. 3, to help me out with pop music reporting, I've recruited Sydney Urbanek, critic and writer of Mononym Mythology, and music critic Catherine St. Asaph. See the link in my bio to learn more about them and their work. And finally, 4, I am by no means the Gaga authority. I'm sure the most devoted fans will have a lot to add to what I have to say here, but I should disclose that I am a self-identified little monster. I went to Artpop. I was there when she closed out Roseland. I saw Cheek to Cheek with Tony Bennett. I flew to Vegas. I force-fed myself Chromatica Oreos. I deeply cherish this album that she signed Joanne instead of Lady Gaga. What I mean to say is I hope this is taken as a serious exploration of an artist I respect very much, and stans, please don't hurt me. All right, thank you. Imagine it's 2008. You're pissed because you voted for David Archuleta on American Idol, but somehow David Cook won. You've watched Tina Fey as Sarah Palin say,
"And I can see Russia from my house."
at least 3 times on YouTube, a website that might just go places. You and your friends gently debate Team Edward or Team Jacob. You're looking forward to High School Musical 3, which is coming out in October. You turn on the radio and hear Just Dance for the first time. Although this video is about Lady Gaga, the actress, it's important to start here with this music in this cultural moment, because as we'll see, her pop persona significantly shaped the critical discourse surrounding her early acting work. Before we get started, I want to give a huge thanks to MUBI for sponsoring this video. MUBI is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/bekindrewind. In a 2010 cover story for Vanity Fair, Lisa Robinson wrote that Lady Gaga had been described in thousands of press clippings as bizarre, a drag queen, fierce, a hermaphrodite, a gay man trapped in a woman's body, a self-parody, outlandish, hardcore, trashy, genius, futuristic, and grotesque. Hardly terms you'd have used to describe any of her pop girly peers at that time.
At that time, we had just gotten off kind of the first, well, not the first, but the most recent wave of there being really huge pop stars around the turn of the century, when you had, of course, Britney Spears, when you had Christina Aguilera, Mandy Moore, Jessica Simpson, all of these people. And at that time, the image that they portrayed was expected to be a lot more controlled and a lot more safe.
When you think about the pop girlies that really defined the aughts, they were all typically selling sex to some extent. at least as far as their stage personas went. That was usually like a job requirement. But they tended to have an off-duty self that would make that a bit less threatening overall. So, the theme really among that generation was they might perform intense choreo, covered in baby oil, singing about sex. But they tended to be like good Christian girls. They were typically straight. They were almost always white. And if not white, then they were light-skinned and like very careful about how they drew attention to their non-whiteness. So there's this era of like, I may get your sexual imagination going in my videos on stage, but at the end of the day, there's nothing truly, genuinely destabilizing about my lifestyle, because I can turn this thing on and off.
Watch me. It's so weird. Sometimes I think I'm more comfortable on stage than I am in my own room. When I get on stage, it's kind of like your chance to let go and be something that you're not, maybe. And then I look back and I'm like, oh, okay, I just did that,
And then came Lady Gaga, who was explicitly interested in destabilizing that pop star framework. Between approximately 2008 to 2012-ish, Gaga's every public appearance had the potential to shock and provoke. For a while, she could do something as simple as leave her apartment dressed like this, without pants, to elicit pearl clutching. But her risk-taking quickly escalated. Each sidewalk became a red carpet for the avant-garde. Each red carpet became an opportunity to try something off the wall. There are numerous examples to cite here, but the two most famous, which will come up again in this video because they really stuck in the mainstream definition of her, are the meat dress, which she wore to the 2010 MTV Video Music Awards, and the egg, which she allegedly lived in for 3 days before emerging to perform at the Grammys. In addition to her extravagant costuming and performance art adjacent displays, she enjoyed provoking journalists with outlandish behavior, speaking with an accent, giving deliberately cheeky answers.
Well, I do have a really big donkey dick.
Eating paper, you name it.
I'm just so fed up with all of it.
Once? Hey, how about this one? What did you...
She challenged sexuality and gender norms, openly declaring her bisexuality to a stupefied Barbara Walters.
Bluffing with my muffin, I hope I'm allowed to say it.
And blurring gender lines by, for example, showing up at an awards show dressed as her character, Joe Calderone.
So we're just a good old-fashioned American man and a good old-fashioned American girl.
Thank you.
I think what Gaga brings when she arrives is this idea that the artist themselves can be alienating, in addition to the work being alienating or difficult or provocative. In my head, as far as like women in a mainstream pop context, that's her big innovation. With every kind of inch of footing that she got, she would take things up a notch. And very quickly there was a body horror element. There was this idea with her that womanhood, maybe even just personhood, is something that you created anew every single day, and that there might be flesh involved in that, but there was also metal and bubbles and pom-poms and, prosthetic face attachments. And there's sort of this like techno, futuristic, Cronenbergian vibe that she brought to pop music. And it's not that it had never existed previously, it's that nobody really had done it on the scale that she did, the way that she made 100% of her life part of the performance and wasn't like sort of switching Lady Gaga on and off.
In that sense, Gaga was not just a pop songstress, but an experiment in spectacle. As music critic John Caramonica put it in the New York Times, she restored a sense of theater to pop. Lady Gaga's main creative act is the act of being Lady Gaga, he wrote. No one in recent memory has been a greater enemy to the authentic than Lady Gaga. In her somewhat unmeticulously constructed universe, there's nothing that can't be rewritten, refigured, revised, or reborn. For fans, Gaga's willingness to be strange, colorful, and challenging gave them permission to be themselves, as did, of course, her music. But as with any pop cultural figure so intent on going against the grain, she attracted critics and haters of every stripe as well. Her political outspokenness, wacky costumes, alleged blasphemy, well, it's a really good recipe to invite outrage from predictable circles.
Oh, Megan, it's just that there's more. I mean, there's always more. You think you've seen it all, but wait, there's more. And this time we have to speculate on whether she has a male member or not, and whether it's been cut off or not. I mean, there's just no end, it seems. I don't even know what's going to be next. And then, of course, they murder. They do a mass murder at the end. And then we've got Beyonce and Gaga, gay, lesbian lovers. I mean, it's disgusting, Megan.
But Gaga also received plenty of teasing from more mainstream press and audiences, too. For many casual pop culture consumers, the spectacle obscured any worthwhile message her music and aesthetic might have offered. She was, for a time, the kind of celebrity it was okay and easy to make fun of simply because she was quote-unquote weird. Like the kind of celebrity they name in Men in Black as being one of the aliens living among us. Already convinced that Lady Gaga is a space alien? You're about to get some confirmation. To a certain extent, this is exactly what she would have wanted. As a self-described master of the art of fame, keeping the audience on their toes with extremes was all part of the game. But you also quickly see her make efforts to more obviously come off as a serious artist, making considered intentional choices. She moved into new creative arenas, collaborated with highly regarded designers and artists, wrote about her perspective on fashion, and delivered interviews to give journalists a more accurate understanding of her process. It would only be a matter of time before she returned to her first love, acting. The 2007 film Grindhouse, a collaborative project between Quentin Tarantino and director Robert Rodriguez, includes a series of trailers for fake exploitation films. One of those trailers is Machete, in which Danny Trejo plays a kind of vigilante lawman from Mexico hired for dangerous jobs in the United States. The trailer was eventually expanded into a feature-length film in 2010, and according to Rodriguez, he heard Lady Gaga in the press saying she wished her music had been in Machete. So he made contact and said, "If we ever do a sequel, if you're ever interested in acting, I would love to put you in it." So when the opportunity to participate in Machete Kills came along in 2013, she agreed and finally got her first credited film acting role. In the film, Machete is hunted by a hitman named La Chameleon, so named for his extraordinary ability to shift identities. To pull off the gag, La Chameleon is played by various actors who dramatically unmask themselves as entirely different individuals. Cuba Gooding Jr., Antonio Banderas, and of course, Lady Gaga. It's a quick debut. She shows up, slays, has a car chase, kills a guy, steals a truck, amounting to approximately 1 minute and 47 seconds of screen time. Yet with so little substance to the role, it's amazing how efficiently the film mirrors and emphasizes the persona she'd established through her pop career. Aesthetically, the film echoes the pulpy visuals Gaga had been producing for herself around this time, particularly in the Telephone music video released 2 years earlier. A murderess on the road, sporting cherry reds and corn yellows, using Americana as a backdrop for violence and high fashion. La Chameleon's shifting identity, though, is what makes the role so specifically Gaga-ian, if you will. Like Gaga, he relishes his ability to reinvent himself, seamlessly moving from male to female presenting and back again. 1 minute the spinning image of a pop icon, the next a mustachioed cowboy. There's nothing that can't be rewritten, refigured, revised, or reborn. In that sense, Machete Kills literalizes the idea of Lady Gaga as a creation or a performance, that Lady Gaga is a character that can be put on and taken off, that some true identity lurks beneath the spectacle. In 2014, Robert Rodriguez recruited Gaga for another cameo in his next film, Sin City: A Dame to Kill For. She plays Bertha, a waitress who offers $1 to a down-on-his-luck gambler. Although the role netted her even less screen time than in Machete Kills, the film again expertly incorporates the general understanding of Lady Gaga from this era into the film's distinct, exaggerated noir style. She amplifies her New York accent, sports makeup recalling her thick eyebrows from Marry the Night, and returns to the diner motif from Telephone. Filmed between stops on her Born This Way ball tour, Gaga even provided her own wig for the shoot. Neither Machete Kills nor Sin City: A Dame to Kill For were reviewed particularly well, with most critics agreeing that Rodriguez leaned too hard on style at the detriment of substance. If critics paid Gaga's performances any attention at all, they typically only took the time to either note that, yes, indeed she was in the film, or to wave off the cameo as a, oh, look who it is kind of thing. After all, Gaga's appearances were so minuscule and so reminiscent of her existing material that hardly anything of value could be gleaned regarding her skill or potential as an actress. Despite this, Gaga was nominated for a Razzie Award for Worst Supporting Actress in Machete Kills, underlining that point I made earlier about how her weirdness made her an easy punchline. Rodriguez, though, had a much more positive perspective, insisting in interviews that she could have a long acting career if she wanted it. The camera loves her. She's a great performer. She's performed twice for me now, and I was blown away by her discipline. She studied acting before she became a singer, and you can really tell. We can hear it now, and the Oscar goes to Lady Gaga.
Let's go.
In truth, these film appearances were happening in the background of a much more significant moment in Lady Gaga's career, the release of her 2013 album, Artpop. Artpop holds a fascinating place in Gaga's discography, which I won't dive too deep into out of consideration for time in an already very long video. But it's basically important to know that the album didn't match the success of her previous albums and sort of became flippantly labeled a flop.
You yourself were quoted as saying last year, "People think I'm finished." Did you feel that people thought you were finished?
I felt like people were, some people were holding me to a very high standard. Everybody's hooting and hollering because, I didn't sell 20 million records this time, which I did with my first album. And, it's not easy to replicate that.
Just as a whole, it wasn't really anything like what people were doing, and which is probably why at the time it wasn't really perceived that well. It's been kind of rehabilitated over time.
Add hip surgery, separation from her manager, the intense pressure of fame, drug use, etc. 2013-14 became an extraordinarily tumultuous time for Lady Gaga, both personally and professionally. So if there were ever a good time to try something different, to show a different side as a performer, post-Artpop was a good time.
So the Cheek to Cheek collab initially was born out of a charity performance that she gave, and it wasn't like a publicized, televised one. She performed for a room of industry people in 2011, and she sang some jazz alongside some of her Born This Way hits. And he was like, hey, I like her voice, let's strike up a friendship and maybe something will come out of it. That's already in the works when Artpop comes out and when the whole Artpop saga happens. And so it becomes a life raft that she has this already in progress friendship with Tony Bennett.
Cheek to Cheek, a collaborative album in which Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga sing jazz standards by composers like George Gershwin, Cole Porter, and Irving Berlin, was released in September 2014. That Gaga and Bennett were performing together at all was at first presented as an oddity, the press talking about their collaboration the way you talk about unlikely animal friendships.
Finally tonight, a musical collaboration with a most unlikely duo. One, a living legend known for his voice and smooth style. The other, one of the biggest pop stars on the planet.
The gentleman jazz singer and the flamboyant pop star.
Where did you meet? How did it come about? I don't see you guys hanging out in the same places.
After all, didn't Lady Gaga have someone vomit on her in the middle of a set? What was the king of crooners doing with her? On a surface level, Cheek to Cheek has nothing to do with Lady Gaga's filmography. However, I'd argue that Cheek to Cheek sets the stage for a broad reassessment of Gaga as an artist, adding new dimensions to critics' and audiences' perceptions of her in ways that eventually benefited her film career. First, the album provided her the occasion to revamp nearly every element of her presentation, subverting expectations by reining in the most extreme theatrics of her performances and public appearances in favor of a more subdued, widely palatable style. She dressed in costumes that evoked classic movie stars or 20th century showbiz glamour, always slightly Gaga-fied, yet appropriate for Tony Bennett's audience. Interviews highlighted sincere deference for Bennett and revealed the extent of her love for music history and genres outside of pop. While she had injected her musical theater training into her live performances since the beginning of her career, often rearranging her pop hits as traditional ballads or performing them acoustically, Cheek to Cheek allowed her to lean full throttle into those instincts and to showcase her vocal abilities in new and exciting ways. This album also gave her access to new listeners who might not have previously been interested in her work or who might have dismissed the spectacle of pop stardom as frivolous. Music critics who, for example, might have viewed Gaga more as a performance artist than a musician were encouraged to take a second look. Ted Giola wrote in the Daily Beast, "This woman has a strong voice and a good ear. She conveys a genuine interest in music as music, not just as part of a larger spectacle." Now, as a nitpicking jazz critic, I'm not about to go Gaga over Miss Gaga, but I must give this lady her due. As a jazz singer, she operates at a much higher level than any of us had the right to expect. I won't go so far as to claim that Lady Gaga is committing career suicide by embracing jazz, but this is clearly a move she is making for personal rather than economic reasons. All of this is important because this is the Lady Gaga who makes an appearance at the 2015 Academy Awards, where she was slated to sing a medley of the most famous songs from The Sound of Music for the film's 50th anniversary. She approached the performance with typical Gaga'ian sincerity and intensity, asking Julie Andrews for permission to honor her in song and preparing over the course of 2 months to sing in Andrews' original key. Donned in, for her, quite conventional formal attire, Gaga took to the stage and nailed it. Now, it's going to sound absurd to some fans, as she had just won a Grammy for Cheek to Cheek, but apparently, this was the first time many people realized that Lady Gaga could actually sing. Multiple articles were written about how her surprising performance could redefine her career. What felt refreshing to many observers was that her performance was shtick-free. She practically invented the current era of pop music spectacle, one that's become an escalating arms race of self-conscious oddity, but her shtick had begun to wear thin, and she reinvented herself in the most surprising way of all, by leaning heavily on songcraft and artistry. Gaga's performance at the Oscars was not about the singer's persona, her ideas, about modern celebrity, or her oddity. It was about the sound of music. For a star whose career has long been about making herself the center of attention, Gaga's ceding attention to something else was a major step forward. Her stunt, it turned out, was to have no stunt at all, wrote Spencer Kornhaber in The Atlantic. Lady Gaga had reminded the room that really she was just a musical theater nerd from New York City, and just as susceptible to the sweeping drama of The Sound of Music as everyone else. The gap between Gaga and Germanata is small right now. Crucially, this all happened in a room full of Oscar voters.
I think what was new here was earning the respective cinephiles and simultaneously hitting this nostalgia nerve for people. I can totally know every frame of that video and what's coming, and I still start to cry when Julie Andrews comes out. And simultaneously being beamed out onto everyone's TV screens, because I think the difference with something like the Oscars versus something like a one-off YouTube video or even an album is it's a monoculture moment.
Just 2 days after her ostensibly career-redefining cameo at the Academy Awards, Gaga confirmed that she had been cast in Season 5 of American Horror Story, titled Hotel, her first major acting job since her emergence as a pop star. She made this decision based on a renewed desire to study acting.
I love this show, and I wanted to get into acting, after years of not doing it. I never got a job as an actress when I was in New York, so I moved on to music. A great job that I love so much, but I missed being an actress because I loved studying acting, and I loved theater, and I loved being with actors and working with actors. So I told him I wanted to, do something on this show, and then he said yes. He was so excited right away, and it ended up being a wonderful, amazing role and a huge partnership with him and all of you now.
So, critics wondered, could Gaga pull off a sustained acting gig? American Horror Story was an incredibly savvy entry point for Lady Gaga's return to acting. The series featured a regular troupe of experienced, well-regarded actors like Angela Bassett and Kathy Bates, who could provide guidance on set. Ryan Murphy had fostered a large queer audience that would have some natural overlap with Gaga's fan base, and the series' unabashedly theatrical style would allow Gaga to work within her comfort zone as a performer. She plays the Countess, 112-year-old owner of Hotel Cortez, a vampiric creature who sustains herself on blood. She dominates her dominion with poise and seductively manipulates her prey, concealing her more protective instincts beneath her steely demeanor. With this role, she could easily replicate and luxuriate in the edgy glamour she so often peacocked in music videos, interviews, and photo shoots. To Gaga, though, the series' macabre shock factor wasn't exactly the point.
I don't just simply do things because they're provocative or because they're shocking. I'm doing it because the story that he's telling about addiction, the story that he's telling about our own narcissism, the story that he's telling about how the human being strives to survive within the challenges of the universe, that to me is what makes the sex so good.
Still, as much as she liked to say that she takes on projects for deeper reasons than their shock value, shock is kind of the point of American Horror Story. I mean, her first scene is literally a cannibalistic orgy. In that sense, the show is a savvy choice for the reasons I already mentioned, but it was also a safe choice, in that it wouldn't necessarily complicate the audience's perceptions of her. For most actresses, a character as strange and bewitching as the Countess would stretch the bounds of their range. But in the context of Lady Gaga's career, the character's flamboyance wasn't seen as an unexpected transformation, but rather an extension of her pop persona, Lady Gaga doing the Lady Gaga shtick. She pushed back against this idea, insisting that she'd done more than play herself, or rather, people's perception of herself in the role.
It's not me. It is something that takes a long time to create. It's something that I work at. It's, the Countess is a character that her voice, the way I walk, the clothing, her candor, the way that she is. It meant a lot to me that I was recognized for it, because I think some people just thought, oh, that's just me.
And I'm actually nothing like the Countess, except that I'm, blonde and like makeup and fashion.
This is essentially how the performance was received critically. Most critics frankly saw her as a kind of PR stunt to attract new viewers and underline the series' extravagant tone. Her visual impact made more of an impression than anything. For example, in IndieWire, I wouldn't go so far as to say Gaga's talent adds much to the proceedings, but her presence and the manner in which it's captured certainly does. And in Vulture, Gaga is terrible here in a way that Madonna was terrible in a lot of her 90s films, at once too poised and too blank. But she's Gaga, a performer who's as much an athlete and sculptural object as a singer-songwriter. So in this context, she works. In the end, a lack of true enthusiasm from critics didn't matter very much. A, she got to dip her toe back into acting as she'd planned. B, the ratings for the series hit new highs. And C, she elicited rave reviews from her co-stars. Sarah Paulson went so far as to compare her to Jessica Lange.
She actually reminded me, I only worked with her once, but she reminded me of Jessica in the sense that she, like Jessica, is like she's like a creature, she's a little bit otherworldly, and also she was one of the more emotionally available actresses that I've ever, she was just right there, just in that way that Jessica is. If you're feeling something, she's often feeling the exact same thing, and it's a really beautiful thing that's rare, and she absolutely had that.
Meanwhile, Lady Gaga continued to endear herself to Academy voters. Her song, Till It Happens to You, co-written with Diane Warren for The Hunting Ground, a documentary about sexual assault on college campuses, was nominated for a Best Original Song Oscar, her first Oscar nominations. Even though she lost to Sam Smith, her performance dominated coverage of the ceremony for the second year in a row. Those James Bond themes really can't lose, huh? Significantly, however, she took home the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a miniseries or TV movie for her performance in American Horror Story. While some outlets viewed her as a shoo-in for the win, it was by no means a guarantee. The category was pretty stacked that year, with Felicity Huffman, Queen Latifah, and Kirsten Dunst, whose turn in Fargo had generated buzz and heaps of critical praise. This win, which immediately went viral for Leonardo DiCaprio's reaction to her brushing up against the back of his chair, was her biggest platform yet to articulate her ambitions as an actor.
So thank you for sharing your talent with me. I wanted to be an actress before I wanted to be a singer, but music worked out first.
You know, I think I'd like to do like one great acting project a year, if not, you know, yeah, I think one probably.
Yeah.
I think one a year would be great. You know, I'd really like to do a film. Now, I'm ready to do a film.
Thankfully, there was one right around the corner. Ever since Barbra Streisand and Chris Christopherson huddled around a microphone to sing Evergreen in 1976, studios have been scrambling for ideas to produce a modern update of A Star Is Born. In 2011, Clint Eastwood, of all people, came close to helming a remake starring Bradley Cooper and Beyoncé, but the project stalled in development hell the way these things often do, and eventually the project passed to Cooper, now lead actor, co-writer, and director. He only had to find a leading lady to play opposite him. That's when Cooper found himself at a cancer benefit where who should be performing but Lady Gaga. He told Vogue, "She had her hair slicked back and she sang La Vie en Rose, and I was just levitating. It shot like a diamond through my brain. I loved the way she moved, the sound of her voice." She was his lead. He went to her house to talk it over, she auditioned, and won the role. Cooper's A Star Is Born broadly follows the contours drawn by the previous versions, principally the 1976 Streisand film. Gaga plays Allie, a singer who performs at local drag bars and who's all but given up on pursuing her dreams of making it big. One night, famous country rock singer Jackson Maine steps into her bar as she croons La Vie en Rose, the same song Cooper saw Gaga perform, and falls head over heels in love with her talent and eventually her. He helps jumpstart her career, her success eclipses his, he struggles with substance abuse, he kills himself, it's A Star Is Born, they've made this film 4 times, you can learn all about it here. While it's not technically Lady Gaga's film debut, A Star Is Born is her first lead role, and honestly, Allie isn't the easiest first big role to take. Historically, the A Star Is Born films have served as vehicles for some of cinema's greatest musical talents. Judy Garland's performance in the 1954 film is, at least in my opinion, the finest work of her career. And while the Streisand film isn't the best reviewed of the versions, her song Evergreen went to #1 on the Billboard charts, won the Grammy for Song of the Year, and netted her her second Oscar, making her the first female composer to win Best Original Song. In that sense, A Star Is Born comes with some baggage. This isn't a remake of some forgotten film. It is, as Gaga herself put it to Vogue, a traveling legacy with a prestigious lineage. Fair or not, accepting this role automatically invites comparisons to these show business titans and confers a level of seriousness onto the project that might not have existed had she taken literally any other lead role as her first. At the same time, the fact that the film places Gaga in this company makes it an extraordinarily interesting extension of the project she began with Cheek to Cheek and has continued in years since, reaching into the past to forge connections with American entertainment's greatest artists and adapting their work for modern audiences. By choosing this specific vehicle, Gaga adopts Streisand and Garland as her foremothers, women who, like her, straddled the line between movie stardom and domination on the pop charts of their respective eras. Although she maintains that she doesn't pursue opportunities in order to cultivate a specific legacy, I also suspect she's too knowledgeable of this history not to understand the implications of placing herself in that lineage. If I were to ask her any question, I'd want to know if or how she sees the through line from Garland to Gaga. Still, Gaga's challenge in A Star Is Born is distinct from Garland and Streisand's. By the time those women filmed their versions of A Star Is Born, they had been firmly established as generational talents with enormous box office draw. Their films didn't necessarily constitute a test of their skill or potential, but served specific purposes in their careers off-screen. Streisand used her film as a mini rebrand and as a first step in actively getting more involved behind the scenes. Garland used her film to make a comeback after years away from the screen due to serious health issues. Gaga had something to prove on screen. Ally was not only her most substantial role to date, but also her most tonally subdued role to date. What does it mean for an artist who specializes in spectacle to work in a medium in which naturalism and believability are valued above all else? A consistent theme runs through the reviews of A Star is Born, that Lady Gaga was unrecognizable without all her typical glitter and glitz. For fans, this might seem a little silly given that A Star is Born followed the release of Joanne, her most stripped-down album to date. But for filmgoers less tuned into her work, Gaga, sans bells and whistles, was a revelation. In Elle, this might just be the most remarkable thing about A Star is Born, that beyond the fact that she's unrecognizable, she feels new. Among the most notable things about her character, Ally, is how stripped down she looks, how vulnerable. In Rolling Stone, Gaga constructed herself as a one-woman visual extravaganza. Remember that meat dress? But not in this movie. To play Ally, she strips herself of all artifice. This reaction undoubtedly relates to the de-glamming trope, in which gorgeous actresses forego their usual beauty routines and appear as quote-unquote normal-looking, or even more daring, unattractive individuals, as a way of signaling that a role is very serious. This is seen not only as the kind of physical transformation that awards bodies typically find quite impressive, but also as a risk to dispel an illusion and to allow the movie-going public to glimpse the real person behind the star. To many critics, Lady Gaga took this concept a step further in A Star is Born. By playing Ally, she not only shed the glamour typical of a very famous woman, but she also dropped her character. Critics often suggested that by playing Ally or performing without intricate makeup or avant-garde costuming, Lady Gaga unmasked herself to reveal the real performer underneath her pop persona. Ramin Setoudeh wrote in Variety, "For most of her career, Gaga has been a larger-than-life presence, hiding behind masks and motifs tied to her album releases. She embraces and abandons personas with each new song, from Bad Romance and That Meat Dress to Million Reasons with a pink pantsuit and cowgirl hat. But who is Gaga?" A Star is Born presents a more intimate look at the artist stripped of her armor. Manohla Dargis wrote in the New York Times that Lady Gaga's disarming, naturalistic presence is crucial to the movie's force. A post-Madonna pop artist known for her elaborate stagecraft and costumes, she has been stripped down here, her mask removed. You can see her skin, the flutter in her veins, which brings you close to her, and can make both the actress and her character feel touchingly vulnerable. This unmasking of Lady Gaga also makes Ally seem genuine, authentic, a quality that the movie champions, and that serves as a kind of thematic first principle. For what it's worth, this is seemingly what Cooper was aiming for, given that during her audition, he allegedly removed all of her makeup with a wipe. This is the woman Cooper wanted in his film. Not the pop star masked with face paint and headdresses and hairpieces, just Stefani Germanotta. Completely open, he said. No artifice. Of course, there's a level of irony here. Gaga is perceived as being more authentic when she abandons the aesthetic artifice of her pop stardom. And yet, Ally's more realistic image is equally, if not more, artificial. After all, as normal looking as she might appear in A Star is Born, she is literally playing a character. Gaga actually confronted this idea in several of her interviews during the A Star is Born press tour, carefully delineating between how she chooses to represent herself in the real world and how she appears in the film.
You know, me without makeup and me with my natural hair, that's not actually me. Like, this is me. You know, so that's Ally.
Oh, but it's your hair and your face.
Yeah, but it's not like the way that I want to dress necessarily, or the way that I want to walk, or the way that I want to be. So I had to really get inside of that, and I changed my hair and I took off my makeup months before filming the movie because I had to get into character.
This question of authenticity has dogged her career from day one, Remember, there is no greater enemy to the authentic than Lady Gaga. But what does that mean to her? Who actually determines when the gap between Gaga and Germanata is small? Whenever journalists ask her about her pop persona, she tends to bristle against the idea that she even has one.
How much does a persona actually affect the musicality?
I don't really know what people mean by persona when they bring that up with me. I just change as I make art, so the music affects my personality and vice versa.
Film scholar Richard Dyer explored the authentic presentation of stars in his 1986 book, Heavenly Bodies, Film Stars and Society. He wrote, "Stars are obviously a case of appearance. All we know of them is what we see and hear before us. Yet the whole media construction of stars encourages us to think in terms of really. What is Crawford really like? Which biography, which word-of-mouth story, which moment in which film discloses her as she really was?" At the same time, he acknowledges that there are certain stars for whom this doesn't necessarily apply. Stars like Mae West or Marlene Dietrich, stars we read in a camp way, enjoying them not for any supposed inner essence revealed, but for the way they jump through the hoops of social convention. Seeing them that way is seeing them as appearance, as image, in no way asking for them to be what they are, really. Lady Gaga asks us to accept her as both at the same time, to accept and enjoy the image as who she really is.
People heard that I did an interview with you. Everybody would ask me the same question, what is she really like?
Photographers say this to me all the, I want to photograph the real you. I'm like, what the hell are you looking for? I'm right here.
Perhaps the greatest evidence of this exists in the credits of her films.
I was just thinking about this in relation to Wicked, with the fact that like Ariana Grande is billed by her birth name. Like Stephanie Germanata could have been acting under that name, but she doesn't. She acts as Lady Gaga, and it's a choice too. I mean, like Beyonce is a mononym, like for all intents and purposes, but when she's in movies, she tends to be Beyonce Knowles or Beyonce Knowles Carter, which is like, it almost confers this air of like seriousness to the endeavor. And Lady Gaga's just been like, nope, I'm gonna act as Lady Gaga. So there's these layers to the whole operation where it's like Stephanie playing Lady Gaga, playing Harley Quinn, or like how does this work in her head?
Only Gaga can answer that question, and that answer will evolve over time as her beliefs about identity mature and her fame mellows into a more comfortable stasis. She has called Lady Gaga a form of armor, and people do call her Stephanie in real life, so who can say? Looking ahead to the Joker press tour, she's already added new dimensions to how she thinks about this subject. When asked again if Lady Gaga is a persona, she told Vogue, it's not a persona. It's not. I'm all of these things. The person that I am when I'm on stage in front of 85,000 people, that is also me. There was a time in my career where I spoke in an accent in interviews or told lies, but I was performing. Now it's a much more palatable mixture of authenticity and imagination. I feel like the world, to a fault, operates in these binaries. You are either real or you're fake. You're authentic or you're shallow. But for me, I played a lot with artifice. I was fascinated with artifice, really truly fascinated with it as an artistic tool. I still am, but my relationship to myself as an artist now is more empowered. This is me. This is me. It's too complicated to split yourself in two and have to turn it on and off. It's so much more empowering to be like, I'm a woman and I'm super complex. It's also worth noting that the actual film probes this topic as well. As we know, A Star is Born, in all its iterations, is in part about the process of star making. What does it take to transform a talented but average person into a megawatt superstar? Does stardom require a seeding of self? The 2018 version asks these questions within the territory of contemporary pop music. After Jackson plucks Ally out of obscurity, she spends time performing on his tour, playing and writing music that conforms to his taste, mostly rock-adjacent ballads. For long, however, she signs with a label that quickly shuttles her into a more conventional pop persona, complete with a makeover, backup dancers, and comically simplistic lyrics.
Why did you do that, do that, do that, do that, do that to me?
This transformation deeply bothers Jackson, who, sensing his own professional decline and perhaps feeling jealous of Ali's Grammy nominations, lashes out by attacking her music and appearance.
Failed?
Yeah, you're embarrassing, and it's just, I know, I feel
I'm
bad
embarrassing?
Although the venom of this outburst is undoubtedly influenced by alcohol, it speaks to an ethos Jackson also expresses while sober, that as a working popular artist, Ali has a rare opportunity to say something real and meaningful through music.
You don't tell the truth out there, you're fucked. All you got is you and what you want to say to people, and they are listening right now, and they're not going to be listening forever, trust me.
That she chooses instead to write this,
Why'd you come around me with an ass like that?
disappoints him. Ali has become less herself, and therefore less capable of delivering something true. As A.A. Dowd wrote for the AV Club, the implication, tired and cheap, is that Jackson's brand of radio courting Americana is somehow inherently better and more honest than contemporary dance pop, a fallacy regularly disproven by Gaga's real music. To be fair, Ali's pop music is surprising narratively. Nothing prior to her SNL performance suggests that she would write a song like this. The film attempts to pin her transformation on a villainous representative from her label. She bristles at his suggestions.
We also have to change your hair. We have to change the color of your hair.
What's wrong with my hair?
But she always quietly accepts them, never expresses regret about it, and defends her music when asked. The final third of the film offers glimpses of her mounting success, but very little insight into Ali as a character. In fact, after that bathtub argument, the film essentially drops the issue of her musical interests altogether. Jackson apologizes for her behavior, but we never learn why she suddenly writes pop music or the extent of her agency over her own career. We never even see her perform pop again. Has Ali succumbed to the formula of fame? Was there a part of her artistic ambitions that Jackson never perceived? The film doesn't really want to say. The reception of A Star is Born was extremely positive, earning rave reviews, especially for Gaga's performance, as I've already mentioned, and grossing over $436 million worldwide. Inevitably, the film attracted awards attention too, with special attention paid to the songwriting team behind Shallow. Like Streisand, Gaga won an Academy Award for her song and ran a strong, let's say bronze campaign for Best Actress too. That race lives in infamy. I wrote all my thoughts about it in this video, which I'll link below. So, Lady Gaga took a huge step with A Star is Born, her first major lead role, singing original songs in a film with a traveling legacy. And she crushed it. How do you follow that up? After seeing Lady Gaga's rousing success in A Star is Born, director Ridley Scott sent her a script he'd had in development for a while. House of Gucci tells the story of Patrizia Reggiani, a working-class girl who, in a stroke of luck, meets Maurizio Gucci, heir apparent to the Gucci fashion brand, and marries him. The brand rises and falls, and their marriage along with it. After Patrizia discovers Maurizio is having an affair, they divorce, and she spirals into madness. Eventually, she recruits a psychic to help her plan Maurizio's murder. They hire hitmen who complete the job, but Patrizia is obviously caught and sent to jail. The role had, at various times, been attached to Angelina Jolie, but Gaga was eager to accept. According to the New York Times, she was struggling with depression as she recorded her 2020 album Chromatica, and even wrestled with whether she really wanted to be Lady Gaga anymore. When House of Gucci offered the chance to become someone else, she jumped at the opportunity. What if I didn't play some edgy, sexy, chancy, risky bitch, she recalled thinking, some punky Italian gold digger. Famously, much of the press surrounding Gaga's performance described the lengths she went to in order to become Patrizia. Perhaps more than any other actress I have ever written about, Lady Gaga loves talking about her creative process and will detail it with earnest enthusiasm whenever she can. She told us all about how it was impossible for her to speak in an Italian accent as a blonde, so she dyed her hair, how she assigned different animals to represent different parts of Patrizia's life and to govern how she moved throughout the film, how how she studied specific Italian dialects that she tailored to various characters, then immersed herself in that accent full time, how she became Patrizia full time, even at home for months on end, to the point that she almost lost a hold of reality, how she called upon techniques she learned in her acting training, name-dropping acting buzzwords like Stanislavski, Strasberg, Circle and Square. It got to the point that Gaga's commitment to the role, or rather her commitment to explaining her commitment to the role, became a joke in and of itself.
I went to Lee Strasberg,
Sense memory.
Stanislavski method. I
Circle in the Square.
I work with Susan Batson.
And then at the Lee Strasberg Institute.
Talk about your craft, talk about your acting.
Which I'd been studying since I was 4.
Right.
I'm gonna do some acting skills now, and I'm gonna do some sense memory.
Of course, the Circle and the Square bit is funny by simple virtue of repetition, which by that point Gaga was known to do.
There could be 100 people in the room and 99 don't believe, but all it takes is one.
You know, 100 people can be in a room and 99 don't believe in you, and just one person believes in you, and it can change everything.
There can be 100 people in the room and 99 don't believe in you and just one does.
There can be 100 people in the room and 99 don't believe in you, and just one does. 100 people and there can be in one room, right? And 99 don't believe in you, but just one believes.
But the consistent emphasis on her credentials is worth thinking about, because she didn't do that to the same extent for A Star Is Born. NYU and Gaga's legitimate theater training have been part of her narrative from its earliest days.
Gaga's a Tisch alumna. Even if she doesn't want to give a secret concert at the Bleecker, at least show me the courtesy of writing back.
You guys talking about Lady Gaga?
So why emphasize it here? I'd argue it goes back to that authenticity versus artificiality question. Gaga may have viewed Ali as a character entirely separate from herself, but as we know, most critics viewed her as basically a stripped-down version of Gaga, the actor revealing herself. Patrizia, however, brought Gaga into the world of the biopic, a genre that relies on the disappearance of the actor. For better or worse, modern biopic acting is judged primarily on the veracity of impersonation. Does Timothée Chalamet sound like Bob Dylan? Does Rami Malek move like Freddie Mercury? Doesn't Charlize Theron look exactly like Megyn Kelly? Consider, for example, that the year House of Gucci came out, Jessica Chastain won Best Actress for playing Tammy Faye Baker. If you go back and watch her interviews about that film, she spends a lot of time similarly outlining her transformation into Tammy Faye.
It's really hard. I have interviewed a lot of people like in Marvel movies who look less transformed in their parts than you do there. I mean, I know that's you, but it's an incredible transformation, but believable at the same time.
Patrizia was not a role that toyed with the twin identities of Gaga and Germanata, or that explored a world in which Gaga could lean on experience gained from years in the music industry. For the first time, a role put her range into question, and she responded the way most actors do, by showing her homework. So Gaga detailed her process with intensity, sincerity, and seriousness, suggesting that she sought to prove not only her acting chops, but also that she belonged in a class occupied by the Jessica Chastains of the world, trained actors using familiar techniques to achieve respectable performances. So, was the performance respectable? Lady Gaga's portrayal of Patrizia Gucci is big. Critics agreed that while the film underwhelmed as a whole, Lady Gaga's truly committed performance made the whole thing tick. Gaga is wildly watchable in the role, broad but unwinking, an absolute scream, and the movie only really makes sense when it's about her. With House of Gucci, you get a jumble of stories jockeying for screen time, and then you get a supernova blazing at the center of all of it that burns everything superfluous away. If the film is remembered for anything, it's for being Exhibit A as to what a great actor she is. Forget Gucci, long live the house that Gaga built. House of Gucci is Gaga's movie, and she tears through it with exuberant yet precise ferocity. She is the main reason why the movie at times transcends the limits of its scripted action. Her performance is an unusual one, all forceful gesticulations and high-relief inflections. She's not expressively complex in repose, except through the flaming power of her furiously fixed gaze, which is the movie's dominant visual trope. While House of Gucci doesn't quite meet the standard of a camp classic, it's a bit too staid and polished for that. One could make the case that Gaga's performance does. Esther Newman writes that, with camp, importance tends to shift from what a thing is to how it looks, from what is done to how it's done. The kind of incongruities that are campy are very often created by adornment or stylization of a well-defined thing or symbol. Gaga's performance, with her wild gesticulations, flamboyant poses, her flair for the dramatic, and, well, that accent, it certainly fits the adornment of stylization bill.
Who does what?
Shared custody? Are we talking about divorce?
At least it's my name on the mugs, not yours.
Our name, sweetie.
You really are only one half of Gucci. The shit hat. Where is he right now? Where is he right now?
I do wonder the extent to which Gaga intended to heighten and exaggerate this performance. Did she perceive the sleazy, soap operatic quality of the screenplay and match her performance to that tone? Or was this a sincere attempt at dramatic realism that accidentally veered in another direction? There's unquestionably an incongruity between the seriousness with which she discusses her performance and the broad strokes she actually paints on screen. Patricia could, in that sense, be an example of Susan Sontag's pure camp. Pure examples of camp are unintentional. They are dead serious, she writes. In naive or pure camp, the essential element is seriousness, a seriousness that fails. Yet, at the same time, if camp is a realization of life as theater, or being as playing a role, then House of Gucci essentially requires a camp performance to succeed. After all, Patricia is overtly playing a role in her own life, embodying the clash of high and low culture inherent to camp. Patricia, like Gaga, is a constructed image, the daughter of a truck driver reconstituted as the matriarch of a dynasty, the working class girl recontextualized in the international elite, the doting wife reborn as an obsessive killer. Perhaps there's no other way to tell the story than to submit to its operatic scale. Act the hell out of the role. Patricia surely did.
Tell me where he is!
House of Gucci grossed $153.2 million worldwide, overperforming expectations on its opening weekend and becoming one of the most successful dramas of the COVID era, thanks in no small part to Lady Gaga's box office appeal. According to Deadline, close to 40% of the audience polled said they came out to see Lady Gaga, while just 32% cited Adam Driver, Al Pacino, and Jared Leto collectively. Anecdotally, at least, that statistic supports my viewing experience. The audience cheered when she first appeared on screen. But the film didn't have the legs to garner award season praise. Although she was nominated for Best Actress by SAG, BAFTA, and the Golden Globes, Gaga was not nominated for Best Actress at the 2022 Academy Awards. Her snub was a genuine surprise, flabbergasting fans and pundits who saw her as a frontrunner, maybe not to win, but certainly to receive a nomination.
She made House of Gucci, and yes, House of Gucci was like largely, or maybe entirely ignored anyway by the Academy. I don't remember the specifics, but there was no song, there was no musical contribution of any kind, and so the Academy was just like, oh, well, I guess we'll just entirely ignore her this year. And then she makes a song for Top Gun and she's back on the stage. So it's like maybe the whole time what has seemed to some people like an embrace of Lady Gaga emerging actress has actually been, please give us soundtrack contributions. We want to hear you sing.
I'm publishing this right after the announcement of the 2025 Oscar nominations, another year in which Lady Gaga's music might have earned her an appearance at the awards, although, well, it's unsurprising that they didn't choose to honor her this time. In 2019, Todd Phillips' film Joker hit theaters and became a cultural sensation. In combining the dramatic gravitas awards voters crave with the familiarity of the most popular genre on the planet, it seemingly had something for everyone. Better yet, it had the box office receipts Warner Brothers could love, over $1 billion worldwide, and netted 11 Oscar nominations, winning Best Actor for Joaquin Phoenix. So while the film was initially planned as a one-off project and not part of a cinematic universe in the vein of Marvel, the studio quickly greenlit a sequel, only this time it would be a musical. Joker, Folie deux, picks up 2 years after the original film leaves off. Arthur Fleck is in Arkham State Prison, where he awaits trial for the crimes he committed in the first film. He meets Harleen Quinzel, also known as Lee, and more often throughout Batman lore as Harley Quinn, at the, prison choir rehearsal, and quickly becomes infatuated with her. As they grow closer, he reverts into his fantasy life and becomes Joker once again, the two of them relishing in their madness by bursting into song. Arthur's trial goes badly, and eventually prison guards lash out at him, murdering a fellow inmate in the process. This violence jolts Arthur back to reality, causing him to admit the whole Joker persona was actually a ruse, and to confess his guilt. Lee, who is deeply in love with Joker and not Arthur, immediately rejects him upon hearing this confession. Arthur is killed in prison the next day. Ever since Lady Gaga was announced as the next Harley Quinn, speculation began about what the press tour would be like. If it were anything like House of Gucci, we'd surely spend months listening to Gaga describe how she became a pyromaniac in preparation for the role and how she studied psychology to better understand Lee's educational background, etc., etc., etc. But that really didn't happen. Partly, I think, because the press tour was cut short from some combination of the movie flopping and Joaquin Phoenix pissing off the entire industry by railroading a Todd Haynes film at the last second. But also, more importantly, because she seems to have turned a page with her mental health and has developed new methods for safely combining her personal life with her art.
I think that I used to feel like I would also, though, make my art kind of like at any cost. And now I think I have found that I make better work when I feel truly like stable at home and like happy and balanced in my life. So as an anecdote, like every day that I came home from set on Joker, I made dinner. And like Michael and I having dinner at the end of the day together was like makes the whole thing,
I'm so happy that you're happy.
Now, given that Lee is Gaga's third major film character, any similarities between her and Gaga's previous roles are, at this point, not mere coincidences, they're a pattern. Gaga plays women who ache romantically, ambitious women balanced in the tumult of their personal lives with a clear vision of where they want to go next. Significantly, Gaga has yet to lead a film on her own, instead playing alongside traditional male movie stars whose characters are gatekeepers to some domain she yearns to join. Ally joins Jackson on a mainstream stage as a successful musician. Patricia aches to be accepted as a true Gucci, overseeing the fashion kingdom. Lee conspires for the dual role of sidekick and girlfriend in a twisted Bonnie and Clyde adventure. Lee and Patricia share the most similarities, pushing their men to embrace their destinies. It's also probably worth mentioning here that the only male lead in Gaga's 5 films that has survived until the end is Machete. Undoubtedly, mental health plays a key thematic role in each of these films, both for Gaga's characters and for her co-stars. As we heard earlier in the video, this subject is tremendously important to her and often guides her decisions to participate in certain projects. This is definitely true of Joker, a film that ostensibly cares about its protagonist's trauma and rejection. When asked why she chose to join Phillips and Phoenix for the sequel, she said,
Actually, it was the first film. The first film really deeply moved me, and I loved it so much. And I think, sometimes when stories are told about people that are maybe misunderstood by society, the director gives you a chance, the actor gives you a chance to really take a hard look at that world in a deeper way.
And I felt like when I watched the first film that I got to understand and see something that I may have never seen before. So that's why I did this movie.
Joker, I think we all know by now, has broadly been considered a huge flop, for reasons we'll get into in a bit. However, as much as the film underwhelms on various levels, it also builds on themes Lady Gaga has explored throughout her career, making it an extraordinarily fascinating and intuitive addition to her filmography. Most relevant to this video is the film's concern with Arthur's dual identity. Who is Arthur really? Does he have an alternate personality that he cannot control? Or does he weaponize the Joker as a mask or a suit of armor to achieve his deepest desires? Is it all the grand plan of a methodical mastermind? While the film lands on a frustratingly straightforward cop-out, each character seems to have a different answer for most of its runtime. Lee very obviously approaches Arthur as a fan or a devotee, illustrating the malicious and manipulative brand of celebrity worship that recurs thematically in her music and that I'm sure she's experienced in real life. She lies to gain access to him, earn his affection, and influence the reemergence of her hero, Joker. Arthur, as a person, could not matter less to her. She wants the symbol, not the man.
I want to see the real you.
If Lee has any specific political aims that she hopes to facilitate with the reemergence of the Joker, that's never clear beyond a vague declaration that she wants them to build a mountain together.
And then we're going to build a mountain.
A what?
She wants to cause chaos. Fame, or rather infamy, is the true object of her affection. Who better to depict this than the master of the art of fame, a woman who, like Arthur, is picked apart to determine what is true and what is performance. Of course, the most obvious way Lee slots into Gaga's larger project as an artist is the film's music. Despite whatever Todd Phillips or even Gaga herself will tell you, Joker, Folie deux, is in fact a jukebox musical featuring a combination of hits from the Great American Songbook in the 1960s and 70s. In that sense, Joker, much like A Star is Born and her collaborations with Tony Bennett, forges a connection to the past, establishing Gaga as an artist who upholds and honors music history. By singing hits that appear in some of the most iconic movie musical numbers of all time, Get Happy, That's Entertainment, If My Friends Could See Me Now, Gaga once again places herself in a lineage that fuses pop music and movie stardom.
But to me, a lot of this music also is what I would call like vintage pop. When all these great singers did these tunes back in the day, this was pop music. And in fact, when Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers did the classics, as soon as they did them, that was what got like indie music into the Great American Songbook. So there was like a top 40 back then. It was just formatted differently.
Shortly after the release of Joker, Gaga released a companion album called Harlequin, which includes many of the standards featured in the film in addition to a handful of originals. When explaining her intentions for the album, she said that when the film wrapped, she didn't yet feel done with Lee, that she still had something to give to the world through Lee's perspective, and this album was it. As her first jazz album after the passing of Tony Bennett, it presented a unique challenge to Gaga, to redefine standards for a modern audience on her own terms, without adhering to Bennett's more traditional instincts. I fully accept this explanation, but I also wonder if she secretly wanted to re-record some of these songs in a manner that better utilized her gifts as a singer than we see in the film. See, Gaga approached the music in Joker, Folie deux as part of her character work.
I think I had a little bit of a different challenge because some of these songs I've sung like hundreds of times, and they were something I was like deeply acquainted with and in my own stage performances. So I actually spent a lot of time with Joaquin trying to find a voice just for Lee, for my character, and really to kind of divorce all of my stage tricks or things that feel natural to me emotionally as a singer, because Lee's not a singer, and I think I wanted to find that same sort of authenticity that he was just talking about with Arthur.
Joker includes a lot of musical sequences. Some occur in a fantasy world that embraces the artificiality of the movie musical genre, while others take place in more or less the real world and reject artifice altogether. Arthur idealizes Lee, so in his fantasies, we see her as a superstar similar to the Gaga we know and love, in glitter, belting her heart out at a piano. The real world, however, is a different story. Gaga and Phillips decided that Lee would not have musical training, and therefore, in the real world, would sound like an average singer. So Gaga went about unlearning her training to sound more Lee and less Gaga. Less vibrato, less projection, less control. I respect that as a creative choice, but unfortunately, I find it completely unnecessary for the musical genre. No, Lee and Arthur are not trained singers, but that is also the case for literally every single musical that is not about a singer. Would a teenage gang member have classical musical training? Would a French prisoner? A lion? Probably not. It's an interesting theory on paper that, in practice, only shatters the fundamental pleasure of movie musicals, the music, and removes the gloss from a genre that almost always requires it to succeed. Rather than enjoying many well-sung numbers, we get the occasional well-sung number by Gaga sandwiched between extensive yet gratingly sung numbers by Joaquin Phoenix. As Richard Brody put it in The New Yorker, Gaga does more than scale down her voice, she de-glamorizes it, and even does so throughout, removing much of the vocal sheen and splendor in favor of a less professional finish. Strangely, the results come off as a directorial affectation, a willful cramping of her style. Todd Phillips' lack of imagination also blunts the impact of the fantasy sequences. Even when Gaga is allowed to be her most Gaga, the staging and choreography feel shockingly hollow. Less the vibrant, engaged concert and more Adam Naiman wrote in The Ringer, "The problem is that while Phillips is admirably upfront about his influences, he doesn't have the craft to make the musical sequences work, not as camp, not as parody, and certainly not as a window into any kind of twisted, tragic psychopathology. Instead, the upshot is the grinding monotony of a decent premise, poorly executed." I guess that brings us to the reviews. Well, I think it says it all that Manola Jargis opened her review in the New York Times as follows. Joker, Folie à deux, is such a dour, unpleasant slog that it is hard to know why it was made or for whom. Michael Ordonia at the LA Times opened in a similarly harsh manner. While momentum issues and general heaviness dog the movie, it does offer up some interesting possible answers. None, though, to the general question of, what did I just watch and why? Yikes. And critics weren't alone. Judging by every possible metric used to measure popular opinion, regular viewers didn't like it either. Except for, I guess, John Waters. To paraphrase Captain Midnight's review here on YouTube, Todd Phillips made a courtroom drama with no twists, romance devoid of chemistry, a musical with a lead that can't sing, and perhaps his cardinal sin, a Joker movie that wasn't a Joker movie. Arthur barely gets into any hijinks, his rebellious spirit largely crushed or expressed in silly, unfunny gags like using a southern drawl as he plays a lawyer. And then of course there's his confession. He's not Joker actually, he's just a guy, it was all fantasy.
There is no Joker. It's just me.
Naiman writes, the movie's thesis, repeated in the dialogue several times by various characters, is that there is no Joker. Quasi-Zen koan that doesn't so much contextualize Arthur's aimless, unsatisfying dramatic arc as negate it, and then transfer that sense of negation onto us. Look, sequels are hard to get right, let alone sequels to movies that grossed $1 billion and got 11 Oscar nominations. Now add to that another daunting layer. Joker is a superhero movie. A highly stylized one cosplaying as a 1970s Scorsese film, yes, but a superhero movie nevertheless, that comes with its own lore, tropes, and fan expectations. It's not that fans are unwilling to see different interpretations of the character, Joker has been portrayed numerous times in varying ways. But they are going to get pissed when you pull out the rug from underneath them, when everything they were excited about is swept away in an instant. And while I don't think this film is as bad as a 1.8 would suggest, I'm not surprised a backlash came swiftly. As for Gaga's contributions, the reception was much more generous. Critics and fans alike largely branded Gaga innocent. The film may be a half-baked, half-hearted musical, but any time that Gaga sings, the movie holds you. Dana Stevens wrote in Slate, "Gaga's Lee is so underwritten, we remain unsure to the end whether she is a vulnerable fangirl or a heartless femme fatale. To make Gaga's character little more than a mirror that reflects the Joker back to himself is a real squandering of this powerhouse performer, whose life experience as a stadium-filling superstar has given her no shortage of insight into the psychology of fame monsters." Critics here on YouTube who focus primarily on superhero films also felt that the film wasted Gaga, not out of a desire for better musical numbers. On the contrary, most of them wish it weren't a musical at all, but because they wanted more out of Harley Quinn, one of the most beloved DC characters of all time. Phillips conceived a curiously tame version of the character. Quinn's kooky sense of humor and outrageousness should fit an artist like Gaga, who is so notoriously willing to portray violent extremes, like a glove. And yet, Lee's most macabre or risque visual is probably this. Frankly, I think this is Gaga's most grounded performance, even though, ironically, she is playing a literal comic book villain. Yes, Lee fits Gaga's filmography like a glove, but the role doesn't have the substance to make it feel like the payoff it should have been. You're simply left wanting more artifice, more eccentricity, more everything out of this film. And the receipts show that. To quote Variety, Joker Folie deux was a box office disaster, grossing just $51 million domestically. Given its massive production and marketing budgets, the film is estimated to have lost at least $150 to $200 million in its theatrical run. What's exciting to me is that we're clearly entering a new era for Lady Gaga. LG7 will drop soon, so I'm sure that's where most of her energy will go, but I'm also sure we'll see more of Lady Gaga, the actress, in the future. Here are some things I would be particularly interested in seeing. I would love to see her either straight up lead a film by herself or act in an ensemble of women. Truly, the best singer-to-actress moments come in this form. Witches of Eastwick, A League of Their Own, 9 to 5. Unfortunately, Hollywood doesn't seem interested in making original stories of this nature. Seemingly the only films interested in utilizing star power to create offbeat original works are book club cinema. So I guess we'll just have to wait until Margot Robbie, Zendaya, and Lady Gaga are like 70 years old to see them do anything fun together, instead of taking advantage of them at their peak popularity. Anyway, on that Witches of Eastwick, League of Their Own note, I'd also love to see Lady Gaga in anything with a real sense of humor. The woman loves My Cousin Vinny, and I'm convinced she is capable of a Marissa Tomei-esque comedic performance. To my earlier point, if you're a film executive with a disposable budget watching this, I'm not necessarily saying put her in like My Cousin Vinny 2, My Niece Vicky, or whatever, but something like that would be great. Thank you. So my final question is, can we call Lady Gaga a movie star?
The whole concept of a movie star just honestly doesn't exist these days to the extent that it used to. Even just among people who are not singers, who were always actors, the idea that you have somebody with that kind of gravitas that can just be the traditional leading lady or leading man and just rule the set and just be a pole all by themselves, I think that's really, you don't really have many, if any, of those people anymore. What I do think Gaga is doing is like portraying herself as such, like really calling upon the aesthetics of the major movie star. And really at this point, that's probably as close as anybody can really get. The era of the huge movie star, for better or for worse, doesn't really exist in the way that it used to. So if somebody is just presenting themselves in this very old school, traditional, like megawatt magnetic presence and just doing the performance of that, well, Gaga's entire career has pretty much been doing performances of something, doing concepts of something, and then making them real. So I think that could fall into the same category.
Taking a look at Lady Gaga's early acting work was such a trip. To think that this was the first step in the journey of someone who would get a nomination for Best Actress. It makes you wonder where and how other filmmakers made their first steps. What do the first films from some of the most prominent working filmmakers look like? Thankfully, MUBI has curated a selection to answer that question for you. The First Films First collection revisits the films that launched the careers of some of cinema's finest auteurs. Some of these films really give you a glimpse into the director's future. Take Coralie Farge's first film, Revenge. That penchant for shocking imagery and interest in women's perspectives we see in The Substance are present right from the beginning. But other films in this collection will surprise you. I recently watched Luca Guadagnino's first film, The Protagonists, in which he, Tilda Swinton, and an Italian film crew recreate a horrific murder that happened in London. I really never could have predicted he would make a kind of deconstruction of the true crime documentary, nor could I have foreseen the way Tilda Swinton used to do her eyebrows. Incredible. With first films from Kelly Reichardt, Lars von Trier, Barry Jenkins, and Christopher Nolan, this is a can't-miss series, especially for aspiring filmmakers. And you can watch it right now for free on MUBI. MUBI is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With MUBI, each and every film is hand-selected by a wonderfully talented team of curators. You can discover the best of cinema at your fingertips, streaming anytime, anywhere. Thankfully, because MUBI is sponsoring this video, you can check out everything I've talked about in this video, plus new releases like The Substance, Dahomey, Bird, and The Girl with the Needle. Truly one of the most insane, haunting films I saw all year. All you have to do is click the link in my description below, or go to mubi.com/BeKindRewind. A world of cinema can be at your fingertips. Get your month free at mubi.com/BeKindRewind today.
You guys talking about Lady Gaga?
No, Blair, I'm talking about Gaga Ahmadinejad, First Lady of Iran.
I don't believe in the glorification of murder. I do believe in the empowerment of women.
We'll be right back.
I mean, I have an interesting mind, but I want to smell like a slut, to be totally honest.
Really used to talking to somebody with my accent. Bravo.